All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another JINSA webinar. I'm Blaise Mishtal, JINSA's Vice President for Policy. We're here to talk about the news that broke over the weekend that the United States and Iran might be close to completing a memorandum of understanding that would bring the hostilities that started on February 28th with Operation Epic Fury to a conclusion, perhaps only temporarily. But to discuss that, to learn what we know about what might be in the deal, what it would mean for Iran, for the region, for U.S. interests, and for Israel's security, I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Rademacher, a senior
دولة
advisor to
تسمح لي
JINSA,
أخذها.
and the former Assistant Secretary of State for International Security, as well as Major General Yaakov Amidror, a JINSA Distinguished Fellow, and the former Israeli National Security Advisor. Thank you both for being with us. Steve, let me start with you. Can you give us a rundown about what we know, and maybe just as importantly, what we don't know about what the contours of this MOU might be?
Yeah, I will explain what I know, but there's a lot that I'm unsure of, and this is because there have been conflicting reports about what is under negotiation and what has been notionally agreed. I think it's clear that in broad concept, what is the meeting of the minds is that there would be a 60-day extension of the current ceasefire. And during that 60-day period, there would be a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, consisting both of relaxation of the Iranian restrictions on transit through the strait and also relaxation of the U.S. blockade of Iran. And during that 60-day period, negotiations would take place on other issues, most importantly, the future of Iran's nuclear program. And beyond that, beyond those basic facts, there's a lot of disagreement. When it comes to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is signaling that they fully intend to maintain control. They're not going to charge a toll, but they're going to charge for the providing assistance to ships in passing through the strait, which sure sounds like a toll. I think the Trump administration would say, no, there's not going to be a toll. As best I can tell, there's not a clear position on that. I think it may not be hard for the U.S. to end its naval blockade of Iran. This is a new innovation in U.S. policy. But in addition to the naval blockade, the U.S. has maintained an economic sanctions blockade directed at Iranian oil exports for many years now. And Iran is clearly negotiating for some relaxation of the U.S. economic sanctions that have discouraged other countries from importing oil from Iran. If Iran gets some relief of those economic sanctions, that's actually an improvement in Iran's situation over the status quo before this war began. So it will be interesting to see if Iran gets any relief from the U.S. blockade in the area of the economic sanctions. The naval blockade, yes, that presumably would be ended if Iran ends its restrictions on shipping through the strait. But we'll see about the U.S. sanctions. A related issue is frozen Iranian assets. The numbers are, $50 billion to $100 billion in frozen Iranian money around the world, frozen as a result of U.S. financial sanctions, threats against foreign banks if they transfer the money to Iran. There's a lot of reporting that Iran thinks it's getting $24 billion and maybe half of that immediately upon signature of whatever MOU is being negotiated. Again, that would be an improvement for Iran on the status quo that existed before the war, because all of that money was frozen up until the commencement of the war. So we'll see whether Iran gets any benefits there. Then when it comes to the nuclear program, again, great disagreement about what would be provided. The U.S. position had long been that all the enriched material in Iran needed to be exported to the United States. Now there are indications maybe it would be okay to downblend it. Maybe it would be okay to export it to Russia or to China. But clearly there's discussion going on about that. And then what to me is actually an absolutely critical question, which is what is the future of enrichment in Iran? Will Iran be required to permanently terminate its uranium enrichment program, or will this be more like the JCPOA, where Iran restrains or suspends its enrichment program, but only for a limited period of time, with the implication being that upon the expiration of that period of time, Iran can resume full-scale enrichment. Again, no details have emerged about this, but both sides seem to be taking quite inconsistent positions in their description. So I think we have a lot yet to learn about what is actually being agreed here. President Trump is taking a lot of criticism from Republicans in Congress, some of his strong supporters in Congress, because they see some of these accounts and think that Iran actually emerges from these negotiations a winner in this war as compared to where they were before the war began. So Trump has been sensitive to those criticisms, and he's said that the senators who are saying such things don't know what they're talking about. And let's hope that he's right about that. Let's hope that Iran isn't going to get benefits as a result of having fought this war with the United States.
If I may add, another benefit that the Iranians will get, according to what was leaked, I don't know if it's part of the agreement, is that the Lebanon will be connected to the ceasefire in Iran, and will be a ceasefire in Lebanon as well. And the meaning of it, it's the end of the attempt of the Americans to build kind of alliance within Lebanon. It's the end of the talks about this arming Hezbollah. It is going against all the efforts of the Americans in the last few years, and it will be a very bad lesson for Hamas as well. I don't know why the Americans agree that it will be connected. It's a huge strategic mistake.
Yeah, so on that point, General Amador, thanks for raising that. I was about to ask Steve if I'm correct in understanding that what has been leaked or the details that have emerged do not include any provisions related to Iran's ballistic missile program, and no mention of anything related to Iran's support for terrorism and its proxies. But I guess, General Amador, you just made the good point. It's rather than asking Iran to curtail its activity with its proxies, it actually would potentially strengthen Hezbollah's position if it in fact does include this provision about ending the conflict, requiring Israel to end the conflict in Lebanon.
Yes, I agree that will make Hezbollah stronger, not militarily, but politically, and they can claim that they are the defenders of Lebanon. What do you need more than that to show that you are the defender of Lebanon? What President Owen will say when the negotiations will be resumed, that he is going against the Hezbollah, which was part of the agreement with the Americans, legitimizing Hezbollah, existence in Lebanon, and then even in a way becoming stronger. I think it is. I don't understand why the Americans agree to this connection. Of course, I understand that they have to be flexible in the Gulf and so on and so forth. They were very successful in the war, but they didn't capitulate. The Iranians didn't capitulate. But what is the connection to Lebanon? And it is against what the Americans are doing in Washington now. I really don't understand it.
Steve, is there any significance to this being called an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, instead of being referred to as a deal or an agreement?
I'm not sure that terminology matters much. I mean, it's clearly not an agreement that will require approval by the U.S. Senate, so it's not a treaty. there is a U.S. law that requires congressional review of nuclear-related agreements negotiated with Iran, but it doesn't sound like this MOU would actually rise to that level, because I'm not sure it actually contains any provisions relating to the nuclear program, except an obligation on both sides to begin negotiating about the nuclear program, but no actual restrictions on the nuclear program that I'm aware of. So I guess if those negotiations lead somewhere, there'll be some sort of higher level agreement that would require review by the U.S. Congress, although that probably would not be a treaty either. It would still be somewhere between an executive agreement, a memorandum of understanding. The JCPOA didn't have any of those titles, right? It was just the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I don't know what status that was supposed to have under international law.
And I mean, is it fair to compare this deal to the JCPOA that you just mentioned, or would it be more appropriate to compare it to the Joint Plan of Action, the sort of the interim deal that preceded the JCPOA by 1 year? Is that how we should understand this? That this is sort of an agreement to try to get to an agreement?
Yeah, although the Joint Plan of Action did include agreed restrictions on nuclear activity in Iran, and I'm not aware that any of the points in this current MOU would amount to restrictions on nuclear activity in Iran. On the broader question of is this something similar than the JCPOA, there certainly have been descriptions of it that make it sound an awful lot like the JCPOA. The Trump administration saying it will restrict enrichment in Iran for 20 years. The JCPOA was basically a restriction on enrichment in Iran for about 15 years. And I think the Iranians have replied, well, no, they could only agree to 5-year restriction on enrichment. So, the compromise between 20 years and 5 years sounds like, around 12 years. It's starting to sound a lot like the JCPOA. I think the Trump administration has been sensitive to arguments that what they're negotiating here looks a lot like what President Obama came back with, because, of course, President Trump denounced the JCPOA as inadequate. He withdrew the United States from it. It would be, I think, quite embarrassing if the result of this war was the entry into a new JCPOA.
So, General Amador, you spoke about the provision that was about Lebanon that's in the reported deal, but I was wondering about the view from Israel about the other details that Steve talked about, including the unfreezing of frozen funds, the end of the blockade, and I guess the agreement to keep negotiating at least on some of these details, whether it's about nuclear program or sanctions relief.
First, I don't know what will be the details of the agreement. What I can say is that at the end of the 60 days, Iran will be stronger. They will have 60 days to repair all the weapon system which had been got from what they got from the Israelis and the Americans. They will have time to expose all the tunnels which had been closed by both our Air Force and our Air Force. They will be stronger economically because they will sell their oil freely. If there is relief in the sanctions, they will even richer because they will get cash. So everyone who is doing the agreement should understand that at the end of the 60 days and during the 60 days, Iran will be stronger. What lead to the assumption that when they are stronger, they will be more flexible than when they have been very damaged by you and us? I don't know. The second phase is the agreement itself. As you said, there is no anything about the missiles, which I think is a big problem from our point of view, and very much depends what will be the agreement. The Obama administration changed the policy from dismantling to postpone and monitor. If it is for 20 years, what the difference between that and the agreement which was achieved by Obama 5 years? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what will be at the end the agreement and what will be exported out of Iran and what will remain in Iran. So for the next stage, it's clear for us that the connection to Lebanon is devastating. Ignoring the missiles is a huge problem from our point of view. And what will be the details regarding the nuclear issue, I don't know.
Well, certainly, I think, General Amador, your view is largely in keeping with Jin says. Our president and CEO, Mike Makovsky, issued a statement on Sunday in which he said, if the reported details of a proposed U.S.-Iran MOU are broadly accurate, it would represent a loss of American nerve and damaging strategic reversal in recent American policy, abandoning many of President Trump's prior red lines, undercutting many of the tremendous achievements of the military campaign, and undermining U.S. credibility. You can find the rest of that statement at our website, jinsa.org. But let me ask you, Steve, actually, let me stay with you, General Amador, and ask you, what is your understanding of how much this agreement and the negotiations with Iran in general are being coordinated with Israel? How much sort of alignment is there between Washington and Jerusalem on this diplomatic track?
I don't know. I know that there were few conversations between the Prime Minister and the President, but I want to emphasize something relating to what was declared by Mike. The lesson in the Middle East from the American hesitation is very bad. Very, very bad. Today, someone from Saudi Arabia said that the Saudis are working very hard to make an alignment between Pakistan, nuclear state, Turkey, hostile to Israel, and Saudi Arabia. If that is true, is an alternative to the Abraham Accord. It will be a huge, disadvantage to the main success of the Americans in the Middle East. And if that alliance will be really materialize, I don't see any other Arab or Muslim country joining the Abraham Accord. And from that point of view, the Americans, as the connection between connecting Lebanon to Iran, are doing steps which are against their own efforts in the last few years.
Steve, since General Amador mentioned the Abraham Accords, there's also been reporting sort of alongside what we're hearing about the MOU that President Trump has been asking Arab leaders, or perhaps telling Arab leaders, that he expects them to join the Abraham Accords when this conflict ends. What do we know about that? And should that be understood as some sort of extension of the potential deal with Iran? Are they part of the sort of the same diplomatic track? Are they separate efforts? How should we be understanding what's going on there?
Yeah, you left out the detail that the president also said Iran would hopefully join the Abraham Accords as well, which would be quite astonishing, given that Iran, the Islamic Republic, since its inception, has been dedicated to the destruction of Israel for them as a result of this war, to meet all the other U.S. conditions plus recognize the state of Israel. That would be an astonishing turnaround. I was frankly confused about by the president's introduction of the Abraham Accords into the middle of this negotiation. I mean, it's fundamentally a bilateral negotiation between the United States and Iran. Why other countries in the region would feel that they needed to join the Abraham Accords as a result of a bilateral U.S.-Iran deal. It would be nice if they did. It was a goal of the first Trump administration, of the Biden administration, and now of the second Trump administration, to persuade countries like Saudi Arabia also join the Abraham Accords. But I think the Saudis have been reluctant and they've attached conditions relating to Israeli policy in Gaza and the West Bank, which are conditions that I don't think are about to be satisfied. So the best sense I can make of the president's comments about this is that they are aspirational, but I don't see much likelihood that even if the negotiations with Iran prove to be an enormous success, that will immediately translate to the willingness of other Arab countries in the region, much less Iran, to enter the Abraham Accords.
So one thought that I had, because everything changes so quickly, but if we think back just a week ago, President Trump put out a post saying that after talking to various Middle Eastern leaders, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, he was calling off the resumption of attacks on Iran that I think were supposed to happen a week ago today. And then in the post announcing the MOU, he also listed a long list of regional leaders that he had consulted with on the MOU. Could it be that, sort of it's regional leaders that are asking the U.S. to choose a diplomatic track rather than resuming hostilities, and sort of President Trump is trying to leverage that and say, all right, if you really don't want me to go back to war, the price you have to pay is coming into the Abraham Accords? Is that a source of leverage that he can use here in your sense?
I suppose he could try that. I personally worry that everyone in the region has taken away from the U.S. policy over the last month or so that Trump is reluctant to resume full-scale war against Iran, and most importantly, I think the Iranians have concluded that, and if they believe that, then they're liberated to be more difficult, less accommodating in the negotiations. So, I mean, the first thing for your suggestion to work would be for everyone to believe that actually Trump was prepared to go back to full-scale war with Iran, and I think there are increasing doubts about that in the region.
If I may add to your answer, which I agree with, is that in a way, the Iranians succeeded to make a North Korea situation. And because the advocates against attacking North Korea years ago were the South Koreans, because they're afraid that it will be the destruction of Seoul and so on and so forth. What happened here is that, according to the declaration, countries in this region do not want the war because they're afraid from Iran, not because they like Iran, or because they want Iran to be nuclear. But at the end of the day, you might find yourself in a North Korea situation that because of the neighbors, you don't act, and you will find nuclear Iran at the end of the day.
Just staying with you, General Amador, given that, do you think it's possible for President Trump to use this situation to expand the Abraham Accords? Is this a moment to be pressing for it?
He can try, but what was the sentiment in Saudi Arabia is not positive. And broadening the Abraham Accords, Saudi Arabia is the most important country. Will they do it? I have many doubts, but the Americans have their own way to convince a country like Saudi Arabia to do it. I mean, depends how much pressure you are ready to put.
How about Qatar? That was I think the other country that President Trump suggested should immediately join the Abraham Accords.
Qatar should not be legitimized. It's an enemy of Israel. It's a supporter of terrorists. They are hosting the half of the leadership of Hamas. The other half is in Turkey, and that should not be legitimized. It's a negative state, which are doing everything to ignite the Middle East through Al Jazeera. It is a country that should not have any position to determine the future of the Middle East.
Steve, maybe if we could drill down a little bit on some of the technical details regarding potential details of the nuclear component of this agreement that might happen. I think one of the things that we've heard from the administration is that as part of this deal, Iran is giving a written commitment that it will not pursue a nuclear weapon. Is that new or meaningful?
Um, I I think it's we would have to be fools to take that as a significant step by the Iranians. I mean, the Iranians have been a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty for decades. I haven't gone back to look what year it was that they ratified that treaty, but 1970s probably. That treaty, which isn't just a verbal commitment, it is a solemn treaty commitment on the part of Iran, never to produce a nuclear weapon. If we took comfort from that obligation that Iran assumed decades ago, for the last 30 years, I guess we've been worried about nothing, right? I mean, if they were enriching, if they were doing covert nuclear activities, no problem, because we have a treaty that forbids them to produce a nuclear weapon and they're party to it and they haven't denounced it. I mean, we don't trust those words, right? We think Iran intends to either ignore them or eventually pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in the same way that North Korea did. And so, to accept further assurance from Iran that they will never produce a nuclear weapon on top of the assurances that we already have, it's just more potentially meaningless words. I mean, I think our position has long been that we need more than just verbal assurances that we don't need to be told there's a fatwa against producing a nuclear weapon in Iran. What we need to see is evidence that the state policies of Iran are not adapted to the production of a nuclear weapon. And everything we see is that they are, in fact, adapted to the production of a nuclear weapon. So that's why we've been alarmed about this problem for so long.
And if I recall correctly, the JCPOA included a very similar, written testament from the Iranians that they would not pursue a nuclear weapon. So if we believe that deal was not sufficient to prevent a nuclear Iran, then a new written attestation, I guess, would not be much better.
I mean, I think they will give us 20 reiterations of their commitment not to produce a nuclear weapon, if we're going to attach some value to them. But I don't know why we would attach any value to Iranian verbal assurances. What we need is practical evidence that they're no longer committed to the production of a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. And then on the enrichment front, I guess the major issue is what's going to happen with the 450 some kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% that Iran has. And I guess there's been various permutations discussed. You mentioned some of them, shipping it out to the United States, shipping it out to a third country. I think China has been the last one mentioned, or downblending it, reducing its level of enrichment, but keeping it inside of Iran. Are all those options sort of functionally equivalent as far as we should be concerned in terms of reducing the threat or danger of that enriched uranium stockpile?
I believe any of those steps would diminish the threat, but I guess I have less confidence today that the transfer of that material to Russia would be a permanent guarantee that material will never be utilized by Iran to produce a nuclear weapon, just because the relationship between Iran and Russia today is very different than it was 10 years ago. And I'm less confident that Russia would have no reason not to return that material. So if we could get it out of Iran, that would be good. But I think some of these solutions are better than others. Transferring to the United States would probably be the best solution. Downblending it, that would be helpful. But I don't know why Iran needs any enriched material. Be nice to get rid of all, not just their highly enriched material, but all their enriched material.
If I may add, from the Israeli point of view, and I'm sure that our experts spoke with the American experts, it's not just the high enriched uranium, not only the 450 kilogram of enriched uranium. Iranians have amount of enriched uranium to less degrees, but as you know, enriching uranium, when you are in 20%, you need 60% of what is needed to enrich the uranium. So it's very much important that all the enriched uranium, not just the high enriched uranium, will be exported from Iran. The best, of course, is to America. But I'm ready to take the risk that it would be export to China with a strong commitment of President Xi that will never will go out of China. I prefer that it will be in America or a country that we can understand will keep it within its own borders and not will be re-exported it.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on that, General Amador, I think it's actually enriching to 20% is something like 90% of the work that needs to be done to get to weapons grade. So it is very far along, even though it's only 20% enriched. So yeah, there are quite a lot of stockpiles of enriched uranium beyond the 60% that are dangerous and would need to be addressed by a deal. Steve, would it, just sticking with the details here, would it then be sufficient, even if we got rid of the enriched uranium in some way, to then have Iran say that they'll suspend enrichment for whatever the term is between 5 and 20 years? Would that give us confidence that their nuclear program has gone dormant?
I think what you're describing begins to sound a lot like the JCPOA, and I never took much confidence from the JCPOA. The JCPOA was sold to the American people on the basis of false rhetoric that it closed all pathways to the production by Iran of a nuclear weapon. That was partially true for a limited period of time, but at the end of that period of time, it was completely untrue. It was, in fact, the opposite was true, that all the pathways were opened at the end of that period of time. And to me, it would be critical to know if the ultimate agreement here provides for some limited period during which Iran is prohibited or has suspended its enrichment program. What happens at the end of that period? Is the suspension fully ended and Iran is free to do whatever it wants? That was what the JCPOA provided, and that was, to my mind, the greatest single weakness of the JCPOA, that it basically opened all pathways to the production of fissile material upon expiration of the restrictions. And and let's be clear, what Iran is not going to make those sort of commitments for free. It will get something in exchange for that, and I think what it will get is probably the exact same thing it got under the JCPOA, which is sanctions relief. The economic sanctions that America has applied to Iran over its nuclear program will be lifted, just as they were under the JCPOA. And so, Iran will get an economic shot in the arm as a reward for these temporary restrictions. So. And that was the problem with the JCPOA. They would keep the economic reward even when they were no longer abiding by the restrictions. It was a completely mindless, permanent sanctions relief in exchange for temporary restraint on enrichment. That was President Trump recognized that was a defective formula when he pulled out of the JCPOA. But let's hope he still recognizes that.
I want to get to questions from the audience. So if you do have anything,
if I may add, I think that it is even worse than the previous agreement, because the Iranians have today much better centrifuges that they can produce and use, and unlike during the agreement in 15. today the enrichment will be very, very fast. So if there is no any limitations after 20 years on the enrichment, we will face Iran with materials ready for a warhead within 6 months.
Thank you, General. So I do want to open it up to questions from the audience. If you have any, please submit them using the Q&A function, and I'll read them out to our panelists. But first, I wanted to stick with you, General Amadrour, and pivot a little bit to the first topic that you mentioned, which is Lebanon, because we've seen an increase in IDF activity in the last 24 hours. With, I think, greater ground operations and strikes into the Bekaa Valley as well. Can you give us a little more information about what is going on?
Right. It's not a bigger operation. We continue to operate in South Lebanon. We are pushing to the north. It's a very limited one. The Air Force is more aggressive. We bomb the areas which are far away from the border. I understand there are some limitations. I understand it from the fact that the Dahya was not hit by the Air Force. And the reason that to escalate was the fact that the Hezbollah succeeded because the IDF was on area which is very close to Hezbollah, but it doesn't move. And if there is something very dangerous for military forces on the ground, is not to move, is to be stuck in one place. And they succeeded to kill around 10 soldiers of us using drones and so on. And it was well understood after such a problematic situation that we cannot be any more duck in we have to move. We have to move, and we are moving north. I hope till the Litani, in the east side, even behind the Litani. Because the Litani in the east is very close to our communities. It's less than 5 kilometers, less between 2 to 3 miles. So we have to do it militarily. And we understand that there are some limitations as can be judged by the fact that the Dahya is out of reach now.
Is this a violation of the ceasefire?
What ceasefire? After attacking us with drone and fire on our soldiers on the ground, I don't see any ceasefire.
What would the impact be, do you think, on the negotiations that have been happening between the Israeli and Lebanese governments here in DC?
I think that the damage of the agreement, which is connecting the situation in Lebanon with the situation in Iran, is much more problematic from the Lebanese negotiators. So some of them probably think that what the IDF did will help them because it put more pressure on Hezbollah and the Shiite community. But an agreement with America in which America legitimized the influence of Iran in Lebanon will make a huge damage to the Lebanese negotiators.
So you're suggesting that if this MOU with Iran goes forward and it includes a provision saying that there has to be an end to the war in Lebanon, that would effectively stop whatever incentives the Lebanese government has to negotiate with Israel and to perhaps go and actually take serious action against Hezbollah?
Look at the situation. The Lebanese anti-Hezbollah caucus said, you are damaging Lebanon. You are fighting Iran war, and we are paying the price inside Lebanon. What now they're going to do? Guys, there is no any more war, And those who stop the war are the Iranians with the Hezbollah. Will it make the government of Lebanon stronger or weaker? And this is what for sure that is the situation that the agreement will be lead to. The Americans say, guys, we want time. We are negotiating with the Lebanese. We hope that they will disarm Hezbollah. We will have to stick to these efforts of the Americans and to try not to disturb them making the diplomatic efforts. But the Americans are doing it through Iran and Hezbollah. That is the end of the government of Lebanon courage to make something against Hezbollah.
Should this IDF operation, whether big or small, be understood as Israel rushing to take advantage of whatever time might be left before this MOU is agreed to and President Trump tells Israel to stop?
I think that it is much more connected to the disability of the IDF to defend itself in Lebanon, and professionally understood that we should go move on at least till the Litani, and it is a professional judgment of the situation. The damage of the agreement in Lebanon will be more because of the political side, not because of the military side. It will not make Hezbollah stronger, but it will allow Hezbollah to say, I succeeded, I defended Lebanon.
All right. Let me turn to a question from the audience, and please, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them using the Q&A function. But Roger Gerber asks, would you agree that the very process of negotiating a vague MOU that is merely preliminary to future negotiations is counterproductive? In addition, isn't the 60-day negotiating period after weeks of negotiating the potential MOU absurd? I know, Steve, let me ask you first.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Why they've been negotiating about nuclear. The Biden administration negotiated with Iran about nuclear issues. The Trump administration has, Witkoff has been negotiating about nuclear issues. Then we had a war. Since the ceasefire, we've continued to negotiate, and now having failed to reach any agreement in any of those previous negotiations, we're going to give 60 days to negotiate. Why do we expect a different outcome, especially, and I think this is General Amador's question, if we relieve the military pressure that they've been under, why is it they are going to be more incentivized now to come to agreement with us on the nuclear program than they've been up until now? And I don't have an answer to that. If you ask me to predict what's going to happen during the 60-day period, I would say at the end of the 60-day period, unless there's been a collapse in the U.S. negotiating position such that we're prepared to agree to things with Iran that previously had been unacceptable, the negotiations will be deadlocked because I see no indication that Iran is prepared to be flexible here. Objectively, they should be flexible. They're increasing the hardship that has been imposed on the Iranian people, but I don't think they care. I think they care. This nuclear program has been an article of faith of the Iranian regimes for 30 years. They've been prepared to pay an enormous price. They remain prepared to pay an enormous price to persist with the program. So I don't see anything changing in the next 60 days that's going to give us a different result.
Maybe if I could play devil's advocate on that, Steve.
Please, prove that I'm wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong.
I think I'm only going to prove your case. But one of the things the Iranians keep saying is, how can we trust you to make a deal? You, the Americans, how can we trust you, the Americans, to make a deal with us? Especially President Trump, after Trump, withdrew from the JCPOA, the last deal we had. Then you've bombed us twice in the last 12 months. How can we trust you to, a deal that you sign is not worth the paper it's written on, the Iranians say to the Americans. And so maybe what is needed and sort of diplomatic speak, we need a confidence building measure, right? We need something that'll bring both sides to the point where they're willing to believe that the other side is actually going to follow through on what they say they're going to do. And so maybe rather than more pressure, we need to relieve some of the pressure to enable diplomacy to flourish.
I mean, they can say that. I guess I have trouble believing that over the next 60 days, if all of that is true, if the only thing standing in the way here is lack of confidence that America will abide by its commitments, I don't know what will change in the next 60 days that will give them that confidence that they lack today. And personally, I think the arguments about lack of confidence are really just a pretext for the fact that they do not want to give up uranium enrichment. They do not want to export their highly enriched nuclear material. They want to be a threshold nuclear weapons state, and that's essentially what they are today, and they want to remain one.
General Amador, any reactions to that question about the value of
It's
further
not
negotiations?
Yes, it's not something that I'm familiar with because it's about the American policy or politicians. Whether we'll be successor of President Trump in the next 20 years probably will be less ready to attack in Iran. Doesn't matter who it will be. So if they have an agreement with Trump, nobody will argue about it. If they don't have an agreement with Trump, they might find themselves in a war that afterwards they will have to capitulate. So if they are wise, they will sign the agreement. I'm not sure that they are wise, and I'm not sure that they are ready to be flexible because they feel that they won the war and the American retreated. And in this situation, the possibility of being logical and sign an agreement that that no American president in the future will argue about is very, very low.
All right. Last question, General Amador. If you had to put a percent chance on whether we're going to see this MOU materialize and actually happen, what would you say?
I'm not a prophet, and I don't know.
Steve, any guesses?
So I think I'm not the first person to observe that one consequence of this war is that most of the people in Iran who might have been able to commit Iran and commit its political system to an agreement have been killed, and what's left are in many cases hardliners, but among those who are left, there are power struggles and confused lines of authority, and I think it's hard to find Iranians who actually can sign a piece of paper and not worry about being removed from power immediately as a consequence of doing that. So I think it's very hard for the Iranians, not because it's not in Iran's interest, but just because their political situation today makes it hard for anyone to exercise the kind of authority needed to sign a deal with the great Satan. So I've been skeptical all along that any deal could be found here just because of hesitation on the Iranian side or inability on the Iranian side to actually forge a consensus in favor of the deal. And it is a characteristic of Iranian negotiating. You can read this in Wendy Sherman's book about negotiating the JCPOA, that they're constantly, the U.S. side thinks it has a deal, and then the Iranians constantly come back and say, oh, just one more thing. We just need one more thing. And Wendy Sherman actually describes how she was crying at one point when the Iranians came back yet again with one more thing. And she couldn't bear the stress and the disappointment. And I think we're seeing that now. I mean, the Iranians, why hasn't a deal been reached? Well, the Iranians keep coming back for more. But I think they need to come back for more because they can't actually take yes for an answer. Then they might actually have to sign the deal. And I think any Iranian who signs a deal worries about, what happens when he goes home afterwards.
By the way, I don't think that these people are more radical than Khamenei. They have experience, and they maybe do not have the authority that he had. But from all the information that I learned about him, is that he was one of the most radical guys within the systems, within the Iranian system. So I don't think that the present leadership is more radical. Maybe they have less authority. That might be true, but radicalism was part of Khamenei attitude towards the Iran, Israel, and the United States of America.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that point, but I mean, I'm talking about the old Khamenei the elder, not the younger, who may or may not be in charge of anything. I don't think we know what his status is, but the elder, he could have delivered a deal, right? I mean, if he had blessed it, there would be.
He had more authority to deliver a deal.
Right. It's not clear there's anyone in Iran who can do that today. His son ostensibly is now the supreme leader, but is he actually making decisions? Is he actually exercising power? There's very little evidence of that.
I don't know.
All right. Well, whether there is a deal or there is no deal, we'll be glad to have you both back on, Steve and General Amador, to discuss whatever happens next. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the audience for tuning in today. Please be sure to check out our website, jinsa.org, for all our latest analysis. Thank you and have a great day. And General Amador, good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.